After a huge win to the Flyers, the Capitals fall to the Coyotes, and Evgeny Kuznetsov clears waivers. Will he report to Hershey? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit fanduel.com/locked on to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about how the Capitals lose to the Coyotes. Yes, coming off a huge win against the Flyers, they fall completely on their face. What went wrong? I'll talk about that in the show a little bit later. We will talk about how center Evgeny Kuznetsov cleared waivers, but ultimately, will he report to Hershey? We'll talk about that. And then a little bit later, we will talk about GM's Brian Maclellan's plans for the trade deadline. But just to get it going here, the pendulum, it swings back and forth. A big win here, a big loss there. It's hard to know what this team is from one game to the next. You know, they're riding high against the Flyers. I thought, wow, this team is doing really well. And then they fall just total facepalm to the Coyotes. And then if you want to rewind time a little bit more, a big win against the Senators, and then a big loss to the Red Wings. So that's what I'm talking about. The pendulum swings back and forth and back and forth. But ultimately, was the game today, was that the final nail in the coffin for the Capitals season? It does definitely have that. I think that, you know, potentially you could say that. I know that not mathematically, yes, but definitely a huge blow to the Capitals' hopes of making it to the playoffs. This was a game that should have been a slam dunk for the Capitals, but where do they always struggle? They always struggle in the games that they should win. Always. It just seems like this season, the games that just seem like a layup for them, they lose. And then the games that are kind of out of touch that, you know, there's no way they're going to win that game, they win those games. So, you know, and I've heard different things that, you know, they were gassed, they were tired, but I hear that a lot. I hear that that is a big excuse, that the Capitals were tired because they were still, you know, feeling the effects of the game against the Flyers. But, you know, that's not going to really cut it. When you make it to the playoffs, you've got to be up for it night after night after night. So this excuse that, you know, the Capitals were tired or, you know, they weren't in it right away, well, that's fine, but it ended up being a huge loss, and they lost to one of the worst teams in the National Hockey League. This one stings a lot, I got to be honest with you. For a Capitals team that really needs to win games, sometimes they can't stop from getting in their own way. That was evident Sunday afternoon as the Caps got trounced against the lowly Coyotes. How do the Caps win big games like the last game against the Flyers, and they totally fall on their face against the Coyotes? That's the thing that's a mystery to me. Is it one of the things that I hear all the time? Is it a trap game? You know, that you go into it and you're kind of playing half cock thinking, well, this is a Coyotes team, you know, that sucks. You know, they play in a barn that only holds 5,000 fans and they're playing on a university campus. I mean, how great can this team really be? Well, it was quite evident today as the Coyotes had their way with the Capitals. And, you know, again, it's funny when I talk about this show, I always eat my words. Like the Capitals, they're not playing well. And then in the next game, they'll play really well. But, we're getting to the point of the season where you can't have, these losses in games that you really should win. The games that you really need to win, you really need to win them. This isn't the beginning part of the season. This is ultimately where the rubber meets the road. These are the games that the Capitals need to win, and just unacceptable. And the Capitals, the players themselves, thought it was one of the worst games of the season. The Coyotes, who dropped 14 of their last 15 games, found a way to beat the Capitals. Some of the good that came out of this game was that Sonny Milano and Anthony Mantha scored a goal. It was Anthony Mantha's 20th goal. Can we believe that? I mean, it's stunning to think about that. Just last summer, we were talking about the do whatever it takes. Get Anthony Mantha out of here. He is one of the key contributors on the Capitals offense, as strange as that sounds. Mantha's 20th goal of the season, and the first time since 2018-2019 that he scored 20 goals, and he also has points in 4 straight games. So stunning. And also Sonny Milano. Milano has 4 goals and points in 5 of his last 6 games since returning from an upper body injury. So Sonny Milano was one of the guys I talked about that we need to see more from Sonny Milano. We've seen that, and that's a good thing. So, there were some good points. There were some bad points. Talking about the other thing was the Caps PP was a good thing. The Caps power play has 8 goals in the last 5 games and has connected in 8 of the last 9 games overall. So one of the things that was, the bugaboo of the Capitals earlier in the season seems to be humming along at least a little bit better. But it was one of the games that, it was penalties really came into focus. The Capitals could not stay out of the penalty box. So it was, those are all the things that are signs of a team that's frustrated. When you spend a lot of time in the penalty box, with these, getting out of hand, you can't control your temper. That's when things are getting out of hand. The low point, and you hate to see this, was when John Carlson accidentally deflected the puck in on the 4th goal, scoring on her own net. Those are always tough pills to swallow. Penalties were the theme of the game and proved costly for the Capitals. Washington took 6 penalties, including 2 unsportsmanlike conduct calls. That's what I'm talking about. That is frustration exemplified. If you want to know what a frustrated team is, that was the Capitals, and it shows because, 2 unsportsmanlike conduct calls, those don't happen too often. So just a rough outing. But the tough thing is to brush your shoulders off this, to go with a positive attitude into the next game. How do you do it? I'm just going to say it here. The Coyotes are one of the worst teams, and you found a way to lose this game. As Capitals fans, as Capitals players, that really stings. The Caps gave up a power play goal in the loss. Logan Cooley kicked it off for the Coyotes, and they never really let go after that. And this was a game that they were in control. They were passing it. It was like the Harlem Globetrotters over there, just passing from this guy to that guy. And it was like the Capitals were stuck in the mud and they couldn't move anywhere. So it's interesting that, again, this team that can really step up on the big stage sometimes struggles when they're playing against lowly teams. What went wrong? That's the big thing. And how do they clean it up? And is ultimately there enough time for them to turn it around? We know we got the Penguins next. We know we got the Blackhawks next. Those are games that potentially they should win. That is the thing. Generally speaking, it seems like the Capitals are up for it when they're playing the Penguins. Let's hope, in fact, that they are for the next couple games. So, maybe they can do it. Can they make a push, or is it ultimately too late? All right, so coming up here after the break, the news broke over the weekend that the Capitals placed center Evgeny Kuznetsov on waivers, and he cleared waivers on Sunday. He is supposed to report to Hershey, but will he do that? I'll discuss coming up. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. And let me tell you something, guys. Maybe you're watching an NBA game. Maybe it's the Wizards and they're not playing that great. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, the game is that much more interesting. Just visit fanduel.com/locked-on and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On Plus, our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Capitals did something crazy in a stunning move. Over the weekend, they placed center Evgeny Kuznetsov on waivers. Yes, the Capitals' 2010 first-round draft pick Evgeny Kuznetsov on waivers. That is not something that you see every day. What was behind that? Will he report to Hershey? That's what Brian Maclellan said, is that if he clears waivers, he will be sent to Hershey. Will he do that? Quite a big move for the Capitals. And, as Capitals fans, I don't think that we should be too surprised. So Kuzi has cleared waivers and has been assigned to the Bears. The question is if he will, in fact, report to Hershey, or will he opt out to play hockey in Russia? That was one of the things that was speculated on, and I'll talk about that, a little bit later in the segment, that potentially that could be the case. If Kuzi plays in Hershey, it will save the Capitals $1.15 million in cap space. Kuzi was waived on Saturday and cleared on Sunday. He has been allowed to return to practice. So he has not been allowed to return to the gameplay, but he has been allowed to return to practice. It's going to be something that you're going to watch, and make sure and keep it to Locked On Capitals, as I will have you guys covered the entire way. Is that, will Evgeny Kuznetsov report to Hershey? I've heard rumors out there in the past that Evgeny Kuznetsov thinks that he's kind of above playing in AHL hockey. What would that mean for Evgeny Kuznetsov, the Bears, and the Capitals? A big cap hit and an inconsistent play most likely deterred any suitors. I kind of thought, someone would take a flyer on him. He is, in fact, a 2010 first-round draft pick and has shown glimpses of greatness. Now, what was prohibitive, like I talked about, was the cap hit and the people that can, the GMs that can see the back of his hockey card. They see that he is inconsistent. Kuznetsov was placed on waivers to honor his request for a change of scenery, Brian Maclellan said. It's about a fresh start for Kuzi. First of all, Mac said he's been looking for a change in environment, and this might set the wheels in motion for that to be accomplished. And, he didn't rule out Evgeny Kuznetsov, making his way back to the Capitals. Improbable, but not impossible. I would be most surprised if we ever saw him with a red jersey on that says Capitals on front of it ever again. He only played 43 games this season, picking up 6 goals and 11 assists for 17 points. And he was also a healthy scratch and has seen his minutes reduced. This has not been some of the best hockey that Evgeny Kuznetsov has played in his career this season. He has struggled. We know that he went into the players' assistance program for the second time, that he has personal issues. He's got issues on the ice. And ultimately, we don't wish, I wish nothing but the best for Kuzi. I hope that he can get right in his heart and his family and his play on the ice. I just don't know if it's going to be in the Capitals organization. We have a history that's going on for a while, and I think it's frustrating on both sides, Max said. So it's just an opportunity for our sides to start fresh and get him to try and give him an opportunity to continue his career. That is what we're hoping for, that, if it's not in the Capitals organization, it would be somewhere else. Mac has tried to move him in the past and will continue to do so as the trade deadline looms. It's improbable, not impossible, he plays for the Caps again. quite a fall from grace for a Capitals 2010 first-round pick. And I did an episode over the weekend talking about him that, was surprising. There was a lot of fanfare. There was a lot of hoopla about Evgeny Kuznetsov joining this team, that there was this guy in Russia that was going to come here and just totally revolutionize hockey for the Capitals. Once again, kind of like Alex Ovechkin did. And we've seen glimpses of that, but ultimately not sustainability. We did not see, goal scoring on a consistent basis from year to year to year. Again, if you're an everydayer of the show, I talk about how he said that I could be one of the best players in the NHL if I choose to be. That's the hard part, is we didn't see Kuzi choose to do that too often. So what do they do going forward here? This was in RMNB. They said his KHL rights are held by SKA St. Petersburg after they acquired him from the Tractor in 2017. SKA is currently participating in the first round of the KHL playoffs. That option would get the Capitals off the hook for the rest of Kuzi's contract and could get Kuznetsov right back on the ice. Before he can play in a game for the Bears, Kuznetsov needs to complete the post-care process of the NHL's player assistance program. So an interesting thing, potentially he could go back to Russia. I just have a hard time believing that to see Evgeny Kuznetsov in a Bears jersey playing in the AHL. At the end of the day, he is a guy, a premier player when he's dialed in, that could he swallow that jagged pill and eat a big helping of humble pie and play for the Hershey Bears. I think that he wants to distance himself from the Capitals organization. Again, this is all spitballing. This is just kind of me throwing it at the wall. As I record this on Sunday evening, I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen. I'm just going to say I would be surprised if he did. Now, there's other things that I've heard as well, and maybe this is Brian Maclellan kind of judging, Evgeny Kuznetsov's character, that potentially, if he doesn't show up in Hershey, that potentially that could terminate his contract from the Capitals, getting them off the hook for the money there. But, Brian Maclellan in his press conference said that they haven't got to that yet, that he wouldn't rule out a buyout. He said, but he doesn't want to get there until they cross that bridge. And talking about that, he has plans for Kuzi playing in Hershey. And he didn't really, say what would happen if he didn't show up in Hershey. But I've seen this in the past, and in the past with different players. If that's any indicator, oftentimes their contract is terminated. Would Brian Maclellan and the Capitals organization do something different? Potentially. And one of the things is I think that Brian Maclellan has done his level best to try and move Kuzi. It's just the cap hit. It's the inconsistent play that has scared a lot of people off. We've heard about for the longest time that they've tried to move Kuznetsov. Kuznetsov himself has reached out to various media sources saying that he wants out of Washington. If he wants out of here that bad, we need to make it happen. Again, I would say that a buyout is the absolute last option that I would try to do, because that's never ideal, especially for a money situation. But let's move on from the Kuznetsov era. Even if he plays down in Hershey, in my heart, in my mind, just from watching this team, I would be most surprised to see, that he's going to get called up or something of that nature. Let's hope that there's a team that'll take a flyer on him and move him out of here. One of the things I spoke about last summer is that the Predators and Barry Trotz was interested in Evgeny Kuznetsov. That was a deal that was going to send Duchesne to the Capitals, but that didn't materialize. So an interesting thing. It's a fluid situation. We ultimately don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if Kuznetsov is going to show up in Hershey. If he does, what does that mean for him? That's a tough thing. Will he show up? Or will he want his contract to be terminated so that he can go play hockey over in Russia? There are at least a few different scenarios that I could see happening. Him playing in Hershey, that seems to be the most long shot of the ones I mentioned there. All right, so coming up here after the break, it is the trade deadline on Friday. And the Capitals' inconsistent play as of late is coming into focus. When the Capitals beat the Flyers, we're like, well, maybe we're still in it. Maybe we should, restock the pond with some great players. And then they totally facepalm against the Coyotes. Does this change the Capitals' posture and their position at the trade deadline? I'll discuss coming up. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last minute deals, all in prices and views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And one of the things that's frustrating for me is that when my favorite band is playing or my favorite sports team is playing, the Capitals, for example, and I can't find last minute tickets, I don't stress out. I don't freak out. I just go to Game Time because why? They take the guesswork out of buying tickets for the game. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKED ON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So there was a press conference following Evgeny Kuznetsov's word that he was being waived. GM Brian Maclellan had a press conference, and they asked quite a bit of different questions. The Capitals press corps, that is, talking about everything from Leonard to Alex Ovechkin to who's going to be on the trade block. It was a pretty interesting interview, about 15 minutes in length, and watched it a couple times just to make sure I could absorb it all because, sometimes the audio is a little sketchy on those kind of things, but some juicy morsels in there, I guess I got to say. The future of the unrestricted free agents, Anthony Mantha, Joel Edmondson, Max Pacioretty, and Nicholas Aube-Kubel. What's going to happen with those? We're not going to sit here and just dump players at the deadline, Max says. If something makes sense for us, if it's a good trade and it's a good value, or if it helps our organization, we have to consider it. But just to go blindly in and say we're going to get rid of these players, we're not going to do that. And I've talked about that in the show, that, Brian Maclellan doesn't have to listen to Elliot Friedman or Frank Saravalli and say, hey, these are on our big trade board, you got to move them. Says who? I mean, if we don't get a good return for Anthony Mantha, if we don't get a good return for Edmondson, Pacioretty, Aube-Kubel, or something crazy, Charlie Lindgren, then who cares? We don't have to, help another team's pursuit in their push for the playoffs unless it makes sense. One of the things he did talk about in the press meeting was that there is obviously not going to be a rental concern. It is all about the Capitals getting younger. Think about what the Capitals did at the trade deadline last season. Hathaway, Orlov out to Boston. The Capitals got Craig Smith and some draft picks. The Capitals took one of those draft picks in Gustafsson and sent him up to Toronto. In return, the Capitals got Rasmus Sandin. Think of a similar scenario to that, except for a forward this time. Those are the kind of things that the Capitals are going to want to do. Also, Anthony Mantha, I've talked about that in the show. An Anthony Mantha for an Anthony Mantha type player, is that an improvement? Or, you take a look at Nick Dowd, for example. He's another big name on the block there. A Nick Dowd for a Nick Dowd, which those guys don't grow on trees. Is that a win? I think the Capitals could maximize their trade if they bundled a player or players together, rather, like Anthony Mantha and Nick Dowd, or Max Pacioretty and Joel Edmondson, that you would yield a bigger return. That's what the Capitals want to do. They don't necessarily, want, prospects, or excuse me, they don't want draft picks per se, or they don't want, old players. What they want, I guess a draft pick would work if they can flip it for a player like Rasmus Sandin, but they want young talent on this ever-aging team. That's really kind of been drawn into focus this season, is this aging core. The Capitals are, in fact, one of the oldest teams roster-wise in the league. They're slowly integrating and getting younger. Those are the kind of moves that Brian Maclellan and the Capitals want to make. Max said that there would be the ideal scenario would be acquiring an additional first-round pick and then flipping that selection for a younger roster player like they did with Rasmus Sandin a year ago. So just what I was talking about there, that's what he wants to do. So don't be surprised if you see someone like an Anthony Mantha or Max Pacioretty, and then all of a sudden you get, some draft picks in return that the Capitals would most likely in turn flip for another younger player. That would be the type of thing that we're looking to do. Maclellan said he has sought a center to help Ovi score more goals as well. And that's one of the things is that, Ovechkin has played better after the All-Star break, but there was quite a bit said that he was struggling to find chemistry with the center that he played with, whether it be Dylan Strome or Evgeny Kuznetsov, Nick Dowd, I think even briefly there, that, he's lacking that chemistry that he once had with Nick Backstrom. But we've seen him turn around. And one of the things that he said is he would like to see more from what they have internally, that he was impressed with Hendrix Lapierre and Connor McMichael, that, that he does have his ear, to the UFA market, if something pops up, but ultimately he's been rather pleased, at least as of late, with Hendrix Lapierre, Connor McMichael, Beck Malenstein, Alexei Protas, those kind of players. But when he was asked if he's sought out another center, he jokingly said, "We called on Connor McDavid, that is, but Edmonton said no." So a bit of sense of humor there from GM Brian Maclellan. He said that he would be willing to see if internal players can fill the void like Lapierre and McMichael, but keeps his eyes and ears open on the UFA trade front. I think he is. And I think that, there's a lot of people, and he talked about that people aren't getting serious yet. I think that between Monday and Friday, you are going to see that really ramp up. I would not be surprised if the Capitals make a move between now and Friday. We don't have to wait, or the Capitals, that is, they don't have to wait until Friday. So don't be too surprised if you hear a move even maybe on Monday. My hope is our young players develop into that, provide us with that. And at the same time, we would be looking for opportunities for a young centerman that are out there too. That would be a philosophy behind it. So again, kind of think what the Capitals did last season with Rasmus Sandin, except this time a forward, a center, ideally. That's what would be said there. So one of the things as well is that they were talking about Alex Ovechkin and how concerned is he about the Capitals' play as of late, and does he even have conversations with Alex Ovechkin? And he says, "As a matter of fact, I do. Ovi wants to win," he said. "He puts pressure on us. I want to win," which is a good thing. I get it. That's why we will try to remain competitive, and I think we are with our younger players. But good enough. Is this team good enough, even with Lapierre and Connor McMichael and Pierre Dubé and Scarbosa and Malenstein and Protas? Are they good enough to take them over the top? Well, we haven't seen real evidence of that yet. I think that they're better than they were to start the season, but I definitely think just the roster constructed as is, I still don't think that they're quite where they need to be yet. So the other big topic as well was the Capitals and Ryan Leonard. When will the Capitals see Ryan Leonard? He also talked about Ryan Leonard, who's killing it for Boston College. He said he wants him to finish up the season for Boston College and make his decision if he wants to go pro next season. That's up to Ryan Leonard. He might want to play another year for Boston College, or maybe he's ready to take the next step. Leonard has scored 25 goals and racked up 47 total points on an Eagles team that is the number one ranked team in the nation. That is quite a stunning resume that he's assembling there. I don't think we want to interrupt his season, Max says. We have a player development guy that goes in there all the time, meeting with him. I don't think it's we want you to turn pro. We'll assess with his agent. We'll talk to him at the end of the year, talk about where his year's at, and make a decision based on that. When he was asked if he believes that Ryan Leonard is NHL ready, he also said that in his opinion, he thought he had the potential to be pro even at training camp in the fall. That's how impressive he is. And, he goes, that's just my take on it. I'm the GM. But he believes that, Ryan Leonard could be pro right now. So if he said, next season, hey, I'm ready to go all in, I'm ready to cash my chips in, take me to the promised land in Washington, D.C., then potentially that could happen. That would be a game changer for the Capitals. You talk about, the players that they have in the wings, even Ivan Miroshnichenko, who needs to cook a little bit more down in Hershey. You got Crystal and Leonard, that if you look to the horizon, not to mention, Chesley on the blue line and Vinny Iorio and those kind of players, that there are a lot of, great young and talented players in the wings for the Capitals that, this season seems to be fizzling a little bit more and more as the days go on and kind of circling the drain a little bit more and more, that, potentially the Capitals will be better here shortly. That is the hope, as someone that does a podcast and is a fan of the team at the end of the day, that they are going to be competitive sooner than later. I don't want this to be a mediocre to less than mediocre team for years on end. I've already seen that in Washington, and it's called the Washington Nationals. So what we're hoping for is that, nothing crazy. He already said he's not going to go out and get a big rental, because what's the point? Why would you get a rental if you're out of it? Potentially, again, like a Sandin type thing. Or, the rumblings out there that I heard from Elliot Freeman is a Noah Hannafin. But, with the Hannafin thing, he wouldn't be a rental either. It was said that if Hannafin comes here, they would want to offer him an extension either right off the bat or make a promise to him in the offseason to take care of it. So some intriguing names, a really exciting time of year as a Capitals fan or as an NHL fan in general, that, pieces will be on the move. How much better will the Capitals be after the trade deadline? I've got you guys covered the entire way, and I'll have a special, of course, on Friday after the trade deadline, talking about all the moves and what it will mean for the Capitals. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Check it out. I think you will love it. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.